Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto has brought Sasuke back to the village and marry a loyal Konoha citizen part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Blood fell to the ground, marking a trail where the boy limped. He was hunched slightly, carrying the weight of another. He spared a glance at the one he carried, a small smile lighting up his features. He returned his gaze to the village in the distance, perhaps 150 feet away. Blue eyes glittered with pain briefly before being replaced by a familiar determination. He had always liked a challenge, this would be no exception. Taking a deep, slightly labored breath, he sprinted forward, carrying something important. Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Hinata Hyuga walked towards the gates of Konoha. As usual, Akamaru tagged at Kiba's heels. The group was discussing the details of their newest assignment. Man, I wish we had a more exciting mission, Kiba said, folding his arms and frowning while he walked with his teammates. Shino sighed, the Hokage needs to have this scroll delivered to the cage. We're not busy, so it only makes sense that we should do it. Kiba looked like he was about to protest, but paused, looking at Hinata. Her curious gaze was fixed on Akamaru. The large dog was sniffing the air wildly, tilting his head as the wind shifted. Akamaru barked loudly, then raced towards the gates. Kiba took off after him, calling Shino and Hinata. When they reached the gates, they couldn't believe their eyes. Naruto Uzumaki was standing there, full of wounds, blood staining his clothes. However, it was what he was carrying that surprised them the most. Sasuke Uchiha, missing Nin, also bloodied and battered. Naruto smiled brightly in his usual way, then cheerfully said, "Hey guys. What's up? Can you call a medic?" Then he promptly fainted, still holding onto the unconscious Uchiha. Sasuke was warm, comfortable even. He was dimly aware of voices in a bright light that made him want to open his still closed eyes. He was tired and his mind was hazy. The raven-haired boy wondered idly if he was dead. No, that wasn't right. Warmth, comfort, bright light. Isn't that what heaven was supposed to feel like? That idea was laughable to the boy. With everything he had done, killing people, including his own brother, consuming his life with revenge, and even attempting to kill his best friend on more than one occasion. That stopped his train of thought immediately as he began to remember what happened. Naruto had found him and challenged him to a fight. He recalled telling the blonde to give up, and he was too weak to stop him. Naruto, true to form, did not back down. Instead he had smiled and vowed to take Sasuke back to Konoha, no matter what. Then the fighting started, and now Sasuke was here. But, where was here? He slowly opened his bleary eyes, and moved to rub them. Or tried to. His hands were shackled to something. He blinked a few more times to clear his vision. He glanced around without moving his head and he realized he was in a familiar setting. Konoha Hospital. He slowly moved his head and saw a head of blonde hair next to him. Naruto was sleeping next to him, close enough that he could feel him breathe. Sasuke was a bit surprised that he didn't notice this sooner. Well, he thought as snuggled closer to Naruto, I'll blame the morphine. Then he closed his eyes and fell into a dreamless sleep. Sakura's mind was in turmoil. The girl didn't believe what had happened, even though she had been there. The day had started off normal. She had been working at the hospital like always, healing a young girl's sprained ankle. Then, it seemed like all hell had broken loose. She replayed the events in her head. Flashback. 2 hours earlier. Sakura heard Kiba before she saw him. He burst in through the hospital doors, yelling for her to come immediately. Sakura heard the urgency in his voice and asked what was wrong. The Inuzuka did not reply, instead tried to catch his breath and pointed in the direction he had come from. The pink-haired girl's eyes widened. Shino, Hinata, and the 2 guards from the village gates were carrying 2 very familiar people, full of injuries and blood dripping onto the ground. Sasuke and Naruto. For a split second, she felt like panicking, but then her medic's instinct kicked in. She called more medics to assist her and they rushed the injured boys to the emergency room. Get the Hokage. We're going to need her. Sakura ordered Hinata. Hinata still looked shaken but nodded and took off. Sasuke's body was full of cuts, most superficial, but they bled profusely. He had a broken leg and bruises turning his usually light skin a deep shade of purple. He was suffering from blood loss and his breathing was impaired due to 6 broken ribs. He was quickly bandaged and his broken bones were set. He put under heavy sedation and painkillers. Naruto was worse off. His chest had stab wounds, both life-threatening and superficial. He had an artery in his leg cut, which caused a lot of his blood loss. The knuckles on his right hand were scraped raw and broken. His arms were full of first and second degree burns which began to bleed. His left lung was on the verge of collapse. However, the wound that scared Sakura the most was on his neck. The slash was deep and straight, like someone had tried to slit the boy's throat. A normal person would have certainly died, but fortunately for Naruto, the Kyuubi had different ideas. Sakura was silently glad for the nine-tailed demon and his tendency of healing his host, even if he only did it because he needed Naruto's body to survive. Naruto had woken up and started thrashing around while he was being stitched up. This movement ripped open the wounds, ruby-colored liquid staining the bed and white sheets. He kept asking where Sasuke was. That saddened Sakura and she was relieved when a blonde woman entered the room telling everyone to stand aside. The medics moved away quickly. Tsunade noticed the desperation and pain in Naruto's eyes. You'll see Sasuke when you're not about to bleed to death. He's fine, unconscious, but in stable condition. She said this while she healed the cut artery, green glow engulfing her hands. I promise. She added, looking back at Naruto. He nodded. Then his head collapsed onto the pillow. End of flashback. It had been nearly 5 days since Naruto had come back with Sasuke. Sakura had been checking and recording Naruto's vital signs when he began to stir. He opened his blue eyes while Sakura gasped, happiness taking her breath away. Naruto, she called, dropping her clipboard and pen and helping him sit up. Hi Sakura-chan. He greeted her, then grinned. Sakura smiled too, then suddenly, her mood changed. Naruto, you are such an idiot. I'd beat the living hell out of you if you weren't so injured. Huh, Naruto blinked, looking confused. Don't you? Huh, me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Sakura yelled, balling her fists. Before Naruto could reply, she continued. This was your super secret mission, you couldn't tell me about. Getting Sasuke-kun back and nearly getting yourself killed. By now the pink-haired girl was pacing the room, back and forth, green eyes blazing with anger. Naruto was scared. It seemed likely that Sakura would beat him up. He had never seen her so angry before. Suddenly, Sakura stopped. She was standing at the other side of the room, when she raced toward Naruto. He was sure she was going to punch him. He braced for impact. Instead, Sakura hugged him tightly. When she spoke, her words came out in a sob. Naruto, I'm so glad you're alright. Thank you. Thank you for coming home safely and bringing Sasuke-kun back to me. She cried a little louder now. Naruto wrapped his arms around his crying friend. There's no need to cry. Everything's okay now, he whispered softly to her. Sakura's face was buried in his neck and he could feel her tears wetting his bandages. With a sniffle, she pulled away from him slowly. Yeah, you're right, she said, wiping away the tears on her face. She took a breath to calm herself. Let me check your injuries. Sakura offered, starting to remove the now wet bandages from his neck. To her surprise, the slash on the blonde's throat was healed. All that remained was a narrow pink line. Sakura was about to comment on this when the door opened suddenly. Ba-chan, it's you. Naruto smiled when he saw Tsunade step into the room. The woman smiled in greeting to the two teens, while Sakura continued removing the rest of the bandages. Good work, Sakura. she told the girl after all the bandages were removed. Tsunade checked Naruto over once more. Naruto, you're a lucky brat. You can go home today if you want. Alright. Naruto cheered, then he remembered something. Ba-chan, where's Sasuke? He asked, looking around the room. Tsunade looked away and replied, he's not here. Where is he then? A different room? Naruto asked, sounding hopeful. No. This time Sakura answered him, sounding sad again. Naruto looked confused. Tsunade sighed, Naruto, you need to understand that Sasuke was a criminal and is still considered to be one. So, like any criminal, he was sent to prison. Sasuke was half asleep when he heard voices. He sat up on his cot in his small cell so he could better hear what was going on. Damn it, I want to see him. Sasuke guessed that was Naruto's voice. I'm sorry. No. Most likely the guard's voice. Let me see him. Naruto yelled. No, the guard said, patience wearing thin. This continued for close to 10 minutes until another guard finally snapped, just let the kid in, Tama. I'm sick of hearing this. The man sounded exasperated. Sasuke almost felt like laughing as he listened. But Jen, we'll get into trouble. The first guard, Tama, whined. Who cares? As long as this kid shuts up. Jen said, sounding frustrated. There was a screeching sound as a metal door opened. See, was that so hard? Naruto called as he walked through the door and into the cell block. Sasuke listened as Naruto's footsteps drew nearer. Sasuke, where are you? Naruto's voice was very loud to the raven-haired boy. He scowled and said, do you have to be so loud, Yuzuratonkachi? It's giving me a headache. Naruto smiled broadly as he approached the cell. He frowned when he actually saw it. It was probably 8 feet high and 12 feet wide, shaped like a square. Sasuke was sitting on a cot, a thin sheet rolled up on the edge next to a flat pillow. A sink and toilet were the only other fixtures in the room. How are you doing? Naruto asked, lowering his voice. How do you think I'm doing? I'm locked in a tiny cell talking to an idiot. Sasuke replied, his voice sounding harsher than he meant. Oh. Naruto paused, then continued, how long have you been here? After I woke up, they brought me here. That was 2 days ago. Sasuke answered, studying Naruto carefully. Naruto noticed this and said, yeah. I'm all healed. I just got up today. No. That's not what I was going to ask. Sasuke looked away suddenly, as though embarrassed. He was actually going to ask Naruto why he had been sleeping in the same bed as him but decided against it. Instead, he asked, how long do you think I'll be here? Naruto was quiet, thinking about it. Hopefully not too long. I will speak to the Hokage on your behalf and she might be able to work something out, he answered. HN. Was the Uchiha's reply. It was quiet for a while, neither boy knowing what to say to the other. After a few more moments of silence, Tama's voice was heard, hey kid. Time's up. You better go, Naruto. Sasuke said, lying down on his cot. Naruto nodded, then smiled. Don't worry, Sasuke. I'm sure everything will work out. I'll see you later. HN. Was Sasuke's reply. Naruto got up and walked away. He didn't want to leave Sasuke but he had no choice. Unlike Sasuke, Naruto believed Tsunade could work something out. She has too, Naruto thought as he left the prison building and headed towards the Hokage's office. Tsunade sat at her desk, annoyed. She glared at the massive stack of paperwork that still needed to be completed. To her, it seemed to look smug. Gathering her resolve, she picked up a pen and started to work, until she heard a knock on the door, less than a minute later. She sighed loudly and said, come in. Shizune stepped into the office, carrying another stack of paperwork. The younger woman placed the forms on the desk and frowned when she saw the amount of work that still needed to be completed. Tsunade-sama, you can't just let your work pile up like this. If you keep this up, it'll never be completed. Tsunade groaned, yeah, don't remind me. Is that all? Shizune nodded and walked toward the door, but stopped at the threshold. She seemed to be listening for something. She remained still for a while, then smiled. Naruto is here to see you. Sure enough, Naruto could be heard calling for Tsunade. Tsunade smiled a bit. All right. Thanks, Shizune. Shizune nodded and said, "You're welcome." Then she walked out, saying hello to Naruto who had just entered the room. Naruto plopped himself down on one of the chairs in front of the desk and said, "Ba-chan, I need to talk to you." The blonde woman noticed the seriousness in the boy's tone and asked him what was wrong, although she could already guess who this conversation would be about. "It's about Sasuke," he said. Tsunade wasn't surprised. "What about Sasuke?" she asked. "I just saw him in prison. He's locked in this cold, tiny cell all by himself. Isn't there anything you can do to get him out of there?" Tsunade sighed. "No, I'm sorry." Naruto was shocked by how quickly she answered. It seemed to him that she wouldn't even consider the idea. "But you're the Hokage," he exclaimed, his feelings evident in his voice. "You should be able to do something. Can't you just order the guards to let him go?" "It isn't that simple, Naruto." Her voice was soft as she spoke. She didn't want to upset Naruto any further, but he still needed to understand. Sasuke is in prison, which is where he should be. "You're wrong. You make it sound like he's a horrible person and deserves to be there." "Well, I have news for you. He isn't. He's had a hard life and has made some stupid decisions, but he still deserves a chance," Naruto said, eyes flashing with anger and a hint of sorrow. Tsunade was beginning to get frustrated. This conversation had turned into an argument and she didn't have the patience to deal with an emotional Naruto. "Naruto, why can't you get it through your thick skull that Sasuke is a criminal? It doesn't matter how much you believe that he isn't. The fact still remains that he ran away from the village, which makes him a traitor. He is guilty of treason." Tsunade's voice had risen while she spoke, her frustration at Naruto's stubborn behavior evident. Naruto was quiet but still visibly angry. His fists were clenched tightly, knuckles turning white. He looked straight into the woman's brown eyes and said, "I already know all that stuff. It doesn't matter to me." Much to Tsunade's surprise, Naruto smiled. His anger seemed to melt away like frost in the morning sun. He continued to speak, "Sasuke is still important to me. Despite all the bad things people may say about him, he'll always be important. To me, he'll never be a criminal or traitor. He's just Sasuke, my best friend." Tsunade was speechless. She wasn't angry anymore, just in awe of this boy and his devotion to another. "Very well, Naruto. I will need to speak to the village elders, but perhaps I can convince them to be merciful. After all, Sasuke is still young and he can be a great asset to the village." "Thank you, Ba-chan. I knew you could help," Naruto grinned. She smiled back and said, "Go home, brat. You just got out of the hospital and shouldn't be getting all worked up. I'll take care of things now." "Yeah, good idea," he said, stifling a yawn. "See you later," he called over his shoulder as he left the office. Tsunade watched him go, realizing that trying to convince the elders not to execute or imprison Sasuke for life was easier said than done. "Excuse me, would you mind repeating that?" an elderly man wearing glasses asked, voice full of distasteful disbelief. The fifth Hokage felt like rolling her eyes, but refrained and repeated her suggestion. "I believe we should show mercy to Sasuke Uchiha. Why? All traitors are the same and should be dealt with in the same manner. For their treachery, they should be executed." An old woman, sitting near the man, replied with a tinge of venom in her tone. Tsunade had guessed that she would say something like that. Koharu is right. Any criminal is undeserving of any kind of sympathy. The man, Homura Mitokado, agreed. "Are you forgetting all the hell that kid has gone through at the hands of this village? We should do something to try to rectify the situation," Tsunade said, referencing the fate of the Uchiha clan. Homura snorted in contempt. That kid had a choice. Nobody forced him to become a traitor. He should have to suffer the consequences of his actions. "I completely agree with Homura," Koharu Udatane said. A hint of suspicion crossed the woman's lined face. What I want to know is why you are suddenly so concerned about the Uchiha boy. You didn't say anything when he was first locked up 2 days ago. She added, a slight smirk on her lips. Tsunade returned the smirk, a defiant gleam in her eyes. Simple. I was considering the possibilities. This statement caught both village elders off guard. Explain yourself, Tsunade Haim. Homura ordered. The smirk on Tsunade's face widened. Are you two forgetting the power of the Uchiha bloodline? If properly motivated, I'm sure Sasuke Uchiha could be an invaluable asset to the village. This got both elders thinking, just like Tsunade knew it would. The blonde woman had needed to change tactics while speaking to the elders, appealing to their militant attitudes rather than their sense of compassion. Before she had even arrived to discuss the situation regarding Sasuke, she had wisely decided that she wouldn't mention anything about Naruto's conversation with her. Knowing the elders as well as she did, she knew it would have only done more harm than good. Besides, they might have even suggested that Naruto himself was somehow involved in Sasuke's actions and they could have had him imprisoned as well. After several moments of quiet, Koharu spoke. You have made a surprisingly interesting point about the boy, Tsunade Haim. The only problem I see is the matter of his loyalty. How can we be sure that he won't try anything against the village? Tsunade hadn't planned for that question. Fortunately for her, Homura answered. A binding contract. Tsunade frowned. What type of contract? Homura stroked his beard thoughtfully. It'll have to be something that ties him to Konoha, but subtle enough to avoid any aggression from him. There was another silence, then Koharu broke it. How about an arranged marriage to someone loyal to the village? He can sign a marriage contract which will be binding and not include divorce. Plus, we could have someone near him at all times to keep an eye on him. Yes, I think that will work. Homura said. Then he added, however, if he breaks the contract in any way, he will be put to death. How does that sound to you, Tsunade Haim? Tsunade was fully aware that this might be the only way to give Sasuke a chance. If she said no, she was running the risk of gambling with the boy's life. Since her gambling luck was as bad as it was, she knew she had to agree. Fine. How do we proceed from here? I will write the contract and Koharu will select Uchiha's betrothed. In addition, I feel that Uchiha should still be punished. Homura said, then added, community service and low-ranked missions only, while being covertly supervised by other elite shinobi would be my suggestion. Tsunade nodded. Excellent. Preparations will start immediately. Tsunade Haim, please have your assistant bring the files of all eligible candidates for the betrothal. Include only shinobi. Koharu requested. Again, the Hokage nodded. I'll have them brought over soon. When do you think you will have made a final decision? She asked the elderly woman. Koharu paused, then said, I feel 3 days will be sufficient. After the decision is made, Uchiha will be released from prison. Homura, can you have a contract ready by then? The man folded his arms across his chest and answered, yes. I don't see why not. This matter appears to be settled now. Tsunade Haim, you may leave. Once this contract is completed you will be notified so it can be approved. The blonde woman merely nodded, then left. As she walked back to her office, she couldn't help feeling a little uneasy. The negotiations with the elders had been easier than anticipated. That was the cause of her uneasiness. She had expected that they would have put up more of a fight about the whole situation, but they didn't. They're planning something, Tsunade thought. That much is clear. Knowing them, it's not going to be good, especially for Sasuke. As soon as the Hokage had left them, the elders had a conversation. Homura, this is a good solution to the Uchiha problem. Koharu said. Of course. If that kid doesn't fulfill all of the conditions in the contract, we'll finally be rid of those cursed Uchihas once and for all. Homura replied, sounding pleased. He sighed somewhat melodramatically. It's a shame we'll need to go through this charade, even though the results will be the same in the end. Indeed. Tsunade Heim is naive and doesn't understand the need for decisive action like we do. This way, we're humoring her so she can't complain. We would be showing mercy, as she had suggested. Just make sure that the contract provides no room for that traitor to escape his fate. The elderly woman said, a malicious tone in her voice. The man smirked evilly, and said, yes, the contract I'm envisioning is as breakable as glass. Sasuke was bored. Not surprising, considering all he really had to do all day was sit and think. The only time he wasn't bored was when he had a visitor. So far, he had been locked up for 5 days and had 2 different visitors. Naruto and Sakura. Naruto had originally seen him 3 days ago. When the blonde had visited, Sasuke found the visit to be mildly amusing. Sakura had come by in the morning that day. She said he needed to have his bandages changed, which was true. The once white cloth was now a dingy gray. Fortunately, or as Sasuke had thought, unfortunately, she had brought some bandages with her. 2 of the prison guards, Tama and Gen, had stood by, as the cell door was opened and he limped out, his broken leg numb. He didn't want Sakura to make a fuss, but she did. He certainly didn't want her touching him, but that happened as well. He was beginning to feel as if everything was against him. Sasuke hadn't felt bored with Sakura there. That was true. However, he did feel very annoyed and mildly creeped out as she stared at him. Her hands seemed to linger a bit longer on his skin than he felt was absolutely necessary. Luckily for him, the ever-impatient Gen had ordered her to leave after 10 minutes. When she had left, she had cried a little, saying something about how happy she was, or something like that. He didn't know for sure and wasn't interested to know either. Sasuke had merely waved her off. Naruto's second visit occurred around noon, same day. Naruto had gotten into a shouting match with Tama and the 2 were bickering back and forth, name-calling and swearing echoing throughout the prison. Finally, General had enough and said, Tama, if this kid isn't out of my sight in 5 seconds, I'm going to kick your ass. Quote. Me. What did I do? Tama protested while Naruto snickered. If you weren't such a dumbass, you'd know that this punk isn't going to leave until he sees that prisoner. I can't listen to this shit anymore. It's driving me crazy. Gen said this last part with a hint of madness in his voice. There was a sound of footsteps, and a metal door screeched as it moved across the stone floor. Thank you, General, Naruto said, sounding rather amused. I need a drink, Gen muttered as he closed the door behind the boy. Naruto wasted no time. He rushed to Sasuke's cell, hoping to surprise him. Sasuke, who had heard the exchange between the guards and Naruto, smirked when he saw the blonde. Wow, Dobi, you really have a gift for pissing people off, Sasuke said, as a type of greeting. Hey, of course, it's a specialty of mine. Naruto grinned. Then he stopped and said, I'm sorry I haven't seen you for the past few days. Those guards are really strict. When I tried to come, they wouldn't even let me go near the building. Sasuke was surprised by the apology. He didn't let it show, however. It's fine. At least I get peace and quiet away from you while I'm here. He replied, still smirking. Naruto smiled again and seemed to remember something. He put his hand in his pocket, and removed an envelope. Here, the Hokage herself told me to give you this. You need to read it right away. Naruto pushed the envelope through the bars of the cell's door. Sasuke picked it up, and opened it. Inside were 2 sheets of folded paper. As the Uchiha unfolded the paper, he suddenly felt very nervous, as though that paper was deciding his future. Sure enough, it did. As he read the first paper, he realized immediately what it was. A contract. Not just any kind of contract. A marriage contract. According to the contract, he needed to be legally bound to another in 6 weeks. His eyes scanned desperately for a name, but none appeared. His worry turned to fury when he realized who wrote the contract. Signed neatly at the top, Homura Mitokado. That scheming old bastard. Another name doubled his anger. Kaharu Udatane. Apparently, The old bitch had selected his betrothed, whom he was supposed to meet. Are you okay? You don't look so good, Naruto said, beginning to sound worried. Sasuke ignored him. He quickly unfolded the second sheet and continued to read. When he was released from prison. Today, at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Sasuke stopped reading, finally remembering that Naruto was still there and looked at him. Naruto's eyes were wide, and he looked almost afraid. What does it say? He asked quietly. I'm being released from prison. Today. Also, I will need to perform community service and low-ranked missions. Sasuke said, trying to sound unaffected by anything he read. He only partially succeeded. However, Naruto failed to notice the worry in the other boy's tone. Instead, the blonde smiled, blue eyes shining with happiness. That's great. Didn't I tell you everything was going to work out for the best? Sasuke said nothing. Instead, nodded and tried to smile a little. Not for his own sake. The raven-haired boy definitely didn't feel like smiling. But for Naruto, who was so happy and blissfully unaware of the contract's words. Somehow, Sasuke succeeded because Naruto exclaimed, "That's the spirit. I can't wait to tell everyone the good news." No, don't, Sasuke said immediately. Naruto looked puzzled, and asked why not. Thinking quickly, Sasuke said, "Wouldn't surprising everyone be better?" Naruto thought about it and said, "You're right. I was really surprised and now I'm thrilled." Sasuke was also surprised, but he was not happy. For some reason, the thought of marrying some random person really bothered him. Of course, he would never admit that out loud. He was an Uchiha, after all. Nothing bothered them. A little voice spoke in the boy's mind. If it doesn't bother you, why can't you tell Naruto? This made him freeze. Why didn't he tell Naruto about his impending marriage? For some unknown reason, the words refused to come out. Kid, time's up, Tama hollered. That snapped Sasuke out of his mental debate. He brought his gaze back to Naruto, who kept smiling the whole time. I need to go, but I'll definitely be seeing you later. Naruto called over his shoulder as he left the cell block. Sasuke said nothing. Instead, he resumed reading the remainder of the contract. At exactly 5:30 p.m., 2 Anbu showed up at the prison building. They had been sent to escort Sasuke Uchiha to the Hokage. The first Anbu, wearing a cat mask, carried a pair of crutches. The other Anbu, wearing a bear mask, passed a note to the prison guard on duty. The man quickly got up from the desk he sat at, and opened the iron door to the cell block. Both Anbu walked in with the guard. Sasuke watched them. They stopped in front of the cell door and the prison guard unlocked it. Let's go, the wearer of the bear mask ordered. Sasuke took the offered crutches from the other Anbu wordlessly. Then, he started walking as best he could toward the Hokage's office. The trip took about 20 minutes. The Anbu didn't speak and neither did Sasuke. When he arrived in the office, a blonde woman was sitting at the desk. There were 2 others in the room. 2 elderly people, a man and a woman. Sasuke already knew who they were. The blonde eyed him warily. So, you're Sasuke Uchiha. I've heard a lot about you. Quote, HN, was his reply. Tsunade had been expecting that. You know who I am, right? Dark eyes narrowed slightly. Yes. You're the 5th Hokage. He pointed to the elders nearby, and those are the members of Konoha Council. Tsunade nodded and gestured to the chair in front of her desk. Sit. Sasuke did as he was told. Her gaze fell on his leg cast and the bandages that adorned his body. Tsunade was fully aware that despite all these wounds that still needed to heal, this boy was still a formidable shinobi. Tsunade spoke, Sasuke, as you are no doubt aware, you are a criminal. You have both attempted and succeeded in killing others. You have also committed treason against this village. That offense is typically punished with execution. However, it has been decided that you will live. You will be tied to this village by marrying a loyal villager. In addition, you will need to work off your debt to society doing community service. All conditions in the contract must be fulfilled. Failure to comply will result in your death. Do you understand this? Sasuke nodded. Just so we're clear, repeat the main conditions. The elderly man ordered him. Sasuke suppressed the sudden need to roll his eyes, but spoke, fine. Condition 1. Marry someone you've selected. 2. Perform all assigned community service, no matter what it is. 3. I cannot live on my own. 4. Have the engagement announced by the end of the week. 5. No high-ranked missions. 6. Have an escort at all times because I can't be left unattended for more than an hour. 7. Spend the rest of my life dedicated to serving the village of Konoha. 8. Be courteous and polite to all authority figures. 9. Make someone happy. 10. Do everything listed, or I will forfeit my life. Excellent. You do understand, Koharu said. She glanced at the clock, and announced loudly, it is now 6 o'clock. The door opened, and somebody walked in. Sasuke didn't turn to look at the person. The person spoke, I'm here as you requested, Hokage-sama. Right on time. Sasuke, turn around and meet your future wife. Tsunade told him. Sasuke turned around slowly and looked at the person. She had long dark hair, pale skin, and unusually colored eyes, white with a hint of lavender and seemingly no pupils. She seemed almost familiar to him. Sasuke Uchiha, you will marry Hinata Hyuga, heiress of the Hyuga clan. Koharu said, sounding pleased with her choice. The raven-haired boy remembered now. This girl, she had been that quiet one who always stared at Naruto when they were in the academy together. That was the only thing Sasuke had noticed about her. Aside from that, he was fairly certain they hadn't even spoken to one another. Hello, Sasuke-san. I'm sure you were told about this arrangement. Hinata said, not looking directly at him. Yes, he replied. My father had heard about what was to happen regarding you, so he volunteered me to be your wife. Hinata said softly, but glanced at the elders. Sasuke understood. The elders had probably convinced Hiashi Hyuga to volunteer his oldest daughter. He wondered what they had told the head of the Hyuga clan to make this happen. Koharu addressed the two teens, Sasuke Uchiha and Hinata Hyuga. In 6 weeks from now, you will marry in a public ceremony at which all villagers will attend. Before the week is done, the engagement will be announced. After the announcement, you will begin to plan your wedding. You may spend time together, or you may not. The choice is yours. Sasuke frowned. Today was Friday, so in less than 2 days, everyone will know what was going to happen. Sasuke glanced at Hinata. She looked nervous, possibly even scared. She adjusted her hair so it covered her neck, but not before the Uchiha's ever-sharp eyes saw a mark. It resembled a bruise, but wasn't the right color. In fact, if he didn't know better, he would even say it was a hickey. Sasuke returned to gaze back to Tsunade, who had started speaking. Thank you for your time, Hinata. You may leave. Hinata respectfully bowed to the important people in the village, but addressed Sasuke. It was nice seeing you, Sasuke-san. The boy nodded. It was nice seeing you too, Hinata. She smiled slightly then hurried out the door. We shall take our leave as well, Homura said, while Koharu agreed. Before he left, Homura said, expect hard work in the days to come, Uchiha. Then he disappeared from the office, Koharu following. Once they were gone, Tsunade sighed in relief, while Sasuke scowled. The woman noticed this and said, listen up. Since you can't live alone, you will need someone to live with. I don't think Hiashi would like it if you and Hinata lived together before the wedding, so what do you want to do? It doesn't matter what I want. Isn't that obvious? Sasuke answered, sounding annoyed. Tsunade was irked. Want to know something, brat? If it were up to me, I'd throw your ass back in prison and throw away the key. The fact is, I did all this negotiating, not for myself, or even you, but for someone else. Someone who insists that you aren't as much of a bastard as people think. She paused before adding, someone who feels you still deserve a chance. Let me guess. Naruto, right. Does he also know about this marriage and the likely possibility that those elders are going to work me to death, or if I don't complete my tasks, just execute me? Sasuke asked angrily, glaring at the woman. No, it would probably hurt him. She replied softly, remembering her conversation with Naruto. Sasuke was confused by her tone. Not knowing what else to say, he asked, "What now?" The Hokage frowned. "You need somewhere to live. Is there anyone you were close to before you left the village?" Sasuke smiled bitterly. What kind of idiot would want to harbor a traitor in their house? Before she could reply, the door flew open. Naruto walked in. He smiled at the two people in the room. "Hey Sasuke, Ba-chan. You both look so serious. What's going on?" Naruto smiled as he opened the door to his apartment. He walked in and said, "Here we are. Home, sweet home." Sasuke walked in slowly. Naruto noticed this and asked the raven-haired boy if he wanted any help. "No," was the annoyed reply. Naruto watched the other boy and commented, "It sure was nice of Ba-chan to heal your leg. It's convenient, because if you had your leg in that cast, you would have needed those crutches and I would have needed to carry you up all the stairs." Sasuke frowned and resisted the urge to blush. As much as he didn't want to think about it, Naruto had actually lifted him up, bridal style, and carried him up the second flight of stairs leading to the apartment. He had been able to climb the first, but slowly. Apparently, too slow for Naruto. One inside, Sasuke sat on the couch, feeling tired. Today had been a long and grueling day. He was pleased it was nearly over. Naruto sat on the arm of the couch, watching him. "Sasuke, are you hungry or anything?" "That depends. What do you have?" he asked the blonde. Naruto smiled broadly, and Sasuke knew he wasn't going to like the answer. "Only the greatest food ever, ramen." Quote. No. This reply stunned Naruto. How could anyone not like ramen? It was unbelievable. Then, Naruto began talking, or more accurately, ranting, about how great ramen was. Sasuke merely sighed and silently cursed Tsunade, who had suggested to Naruto the idea of Sasuke living with him. As he listened to Naruto rant, he realized that by accepting the terms of the elders' contract, he had just entered another prison. This time, it would be up to him whether he wanted to be executed or lived. He wondered idly if living was so important. To him, that contract was so demeaning, and who knows what kind of other plans the elders had in store for him. He might just fail, no matter how hard he tried. Or, he just might be able to beat them at their own game. This last thought brought a smirk to his lips. His mood brightened and he said, "Naruto. Shut up and get me some ramen." Naruto smiled triumphantly before saying, "I knew you would see it my way." As he walked into the small kitchen. For some reason, Sasuke thought about the other boy's smile and cheerful behavior over something so simple. Perhaps living would be so important after all. Sasuke mused as he went into the kitchen. Sasuke glared at the calendar. Today was Sunday, and later on his engagement would be announced to the whole village. Naturally, he wasn't too thrilled. He continued to sip his tea, trying to think about something else. His gaze fell on a folded sheet of paper, near the couch where he was currently sitting. He placed his tea in the small table in front of him, and leaned over to retrieve the paper. He unfolded it and read it. It was for Naruto. Apparently, Naruto had a mission today at 12:30 in the afternoon. Sasuke glanced at the clock. It was now noon and Naruto hadn't even woken up yet. Why am I not surprised? He muttered to himself as he walked to the blonde's bedroom. Although the room door was open, Sasuke still knocked. Not surprisingly, Naruto didn't react. Sasuke called him. No response. Sighing, the raven-haired boy walked up to the bed and began to gently shake the sleeping boy while sitting on the bed. Losing his patience, Sasuke leaned over Naruto. He placed his hands over the whisker marks that adorned the other boy's cheeks. Then, he slowly started to pull at Naruto's face. He pulled until Naruto's mouth was pulled into a peculiar smile. "Wake up, Dobi. You have a mission, he said. Naruto's eyes opened slowly and he looked at Sasuke, his blue eyes unfocused. Then he tried to speak but the words were unclear. Sasuke released his grip on Naruto's face and asked him to repeat that. What time is it? Asked Naruto, still sounding sleepy. Sasuke glanced at the bedside clock and replied, 8 minutes past 12. Hearing that, Naruto's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Oh shit, I'm going to be late. Tsunade Ba-chan is going to kill me. Naruto exclaimed, sounding panicked. He quickly got up, and in his haste, pushed Sasuke off the bed. Sasuke hit the wooden floor with a thud. Naruto, you better hope Tsunade kills you, or else I'm going to do it myself, he threatened. But Naruto wasn't listening. Instead, he grabbed a change of clothes from his closet and darted to the shower, shedding his slept-in clothes along the way. Sasuke growled when a shirt landed on his head. He's just begging for it now, Sasuke thought as he got up and began picking up Naruto's discarded clothing. Sasuke tossed the clothes into a hamper on the way back to the kitchen. Once back in the kitchen, he opened the cabinet and removed an instant ramen and put it on the counter. After he filled a teapot with water, he placed it on the stove top and turned on the gas burner. Sasuke returned to the living room and finished his tea. He took his empty cup, along with the dishes he had used when he had eaten breakfast, and took them to the sink to be washed. Once finished with the dishes, he removed the teapot off the stove and filled the instant ramen cup with hot water. While he did this, he noticed the shower had stopped running, indicating Naruto was almost finished getting ready. Sasuke removed a pair of wooden chopsticks from a drawer and left it near the ramen. At nearly the exact time the ramen was finished, Naruto came out of the bathroom, tying his headband to his forehead. Are you ready to go, Sasuke? Sasuke rolled his eyes. Dobi, I've been waiting for you, he replied, stirring the ramen. Alright, I just need to. Naruto didn't finish his sentence. He had seen Sasuke with the freshly prepared ramen, and as if on cue, his stomach growled. Blue eyes widened. Hey Sasuke, are you going to eat that? The blonde asked, wiping a bit of drool off his mouth. Sasuke snorted, of course not. I made it for you. Naruto smiled broadly. Really? Yeah, let's go. If you're late, we'll both be in trouble. Sasuke replied, opening the door to leave. Naruto grabbed the ramen and chopsticks and left, feeling like today was going to be a great day. While they walked to Tsunade's office, Naruto ate his ramen. Sasuke didn't understand how anybody could eat ramen so often without getting sick of it. He was pulled out of his thoughts when Naruto spoke. He sounded almost embarrassed. Why did you make me this? He asked, holding the nearly empty ramen container. The Uchiha looked at him and Naruto quickly added, it's not that I don't appreciate it or anything, but I guess I'm just curious. HN, was his reply. Naruto thought that was all the response he was going to get until Sasuke continued, if you must know, it's so you won't complain like you did yesterday. Naruto remembered. Yesterday had been similar to today. Naruto had a simple mission, and Sasuke, who wasn't allowed to be left alone, had joined him. The mission was to find a lost dog. Unfortunately, the dog was very skilled at running away. It had taken close to 4 hours to retrieve her, and Naruto had unwisely skipped breakfast, believing the task would be accomplished quickly. 2 hours into the mission, Naruto had started complaining about being hungry. It was very annoying to Sasuke, who was actually trying to find the runaway pet and complete the assignment. The moment the dog was returned to her owner, Naruto had raced to Ichiraku Ramen, dragging Sasuke along in the process. Naruto grinned sheepishly and scratched the back of his neck, sorry about that. He gulped down the remainder of his instant ramen and tossed the used chopsticks and empty container into a nearby trash can. After a moment more of quiet, Naruto spoke again, you know something, Sasuke? You're a pretty good roommate. So, thanks. Sasuke shrugged. I'm just doing what I need to. That's all there is to it. Naruto frowned a bit, hearing his reply. Sasuke noticed and sighed, but, I suppose you're welcome. Then he smiled slightly at Naruto. The blonde's grin returned. Truth be told, Sasuke really was a good roommate. In the short time he had been living with Naruto, he made everything neat and tidy. He cooked, cleaned, and even did the laundry. Originally, Naruto's apartment had been rather cluttered. There were empty food wrappers and containers all over the kitchen, clothes lying around, and even a few kunai on the ground. After reprimanding Naruto on his poor housekeeping skills, Sasuke had gotten to work, making the apartment look much better. Who would have guessed Sasuke was so domestic? Obviously not Naruto, but he was still happy about the whole thing. Before long, they had arrived at Tsunade's office. The Hokage was giving Naruto his mission details, while Sasuke sat nearby, listening. Today, you will go on a routine scouting mission. There have been reports of bandits roaming around the perimeter of the village and I need you to investigate and see if there is any threat. Quote. Naruto nodded in understanding, is that all? Yes, but you will be on a 3-man squad, just in case. All 3 of you will meet up at the village gate. Tsunade answered. Alright, who are my teammates? Asked Naruto. Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi. Sasuke isn't coming with me. No, he can't leave the village. Besides, I need to talk to him anyway. You can pick him up when you get back. Tsunade said, glancing at Sasuke. Okay, I'll see you guys later then. Naruto said, moving toward the door. Before he left, he said, be good, Sasuke. He hurried out the door before Sasuke could reply. Tsunade laughed when she saw Sasuke's frown. He clearly didn't like being spoken to as if he were a child, especially by Naruto, whom he was older than. Lighten up, brat. You know he's just teasing you. Tsunade sighed and said, fine. Whatever. Her tone became serious when he changed topics. Today is the day your engagement will be announced to the village. I know that. Don't tell me I'm supposed to do it. Sasuke replied, sounding annoyed. No. Originally, the elders were planning on having you propose to Hinata in a public area, then invite all the villagers. Why the hell would I do that? Like I said, they were planning that, but I convinced them not to do it. I told them it would look strange, because you're not that type of person. Everyone would be questioning the whole event. What's supposed to happen then? Sasuke asked, folding his arms across his chest. I don't know for sure, but I suspect the elders will not be mentioning anything about the true reason for your marriage. Sasuke smirked. Why wouldn't the villagers want to know that? Get married or die. Sounds great to me. Sarcasm filled his voice. Tsunade was getting annoyed with the boy. If you had read the contract thoroughly, you would have noticed that nobody was supposed to know the true reason, aside from you, the bride, myself, and the elders, of course. If anyone else knew, then the condition would be violated and the contract would be broken. Isn't it strange that they would put something unusual like that in the contract? It's rather suspicious, wouldn't you agree? Sasuke asked casually, as if he were merely asking how her day was. Tsunade smiled slightly. Yeah, but I suspect that if anyone else knew, they may disagree with the decision. Some may say you should just be executed, or you should be imprisoned. She paused. There was a knowing look in her eyes as she added, I am certain that someone may think it was unfair for you to marry a stranger, and then that person may make a scene, which I'm sure would be bad for you. Sasuke understood. I can't even tell Naruto, even though I'm living under the same roof as him. The Hokage nodded. Yes. The elders said that this must be kept secret. If they found out that someone else knew, they would claim you broke the contract and set a date for your execution. Sasuke wasn't surprised. It seemed that contract was specifically designed to be exceptionally fragile. One false move and it was over for him. I'll just need to be extra careful, and I'll be fine. Sasuke thought. Sasuke, you can go now. The announcement will be made in an hour. An Anbu will be watching you, so be on your best behavior. Tsunade said, getting to work on the pile of forms that stood near the desk. Fine. Sasuke left the office, closing the door behind him. Sasuke needed to go somewhere he wouldn't be noticed. He decided that the Hokage monument should provide some much-needed quiet. Tsunade, Homura, and Kaharu stood before the crowd of villagers. Hello, loyal citizens of Konoha. I have called you here to formally invite you to a celebration, less than 6 weeks from now. Tsunade began. A few members of the crowd asked what kind of celebration, while others cheered. Homura answered, a joining of 2 lives. A marriage. More cheers greeted the answer. The wedding shall be between Sasuke Uchiha, last of the esteemed Uchiha clan, and his chosen bride, Hinata Hyuga, heiress of the Hyuga clan. Kaharu continued. There were whispers in the crowd as this bit of news reached their ears. Uchiha, Hyuga, that's going to be one heck of a wedding, was the main reaction of the crowd. Others, mainly shinobi, were a bit wary, knowing that Sasuke had left the village and had only recently been brought back. A few women in the crowd were jealous that Hinata was going to marry that sexy Uchiha, as they had described him. Tsunade waited a few moments to the crowd to settle down before continuing. This invitation will be for all citizens of Konoha. It will be a joyous occasion that will be shared with all. This produced more cheering from the crowd. It seemed as though the whole village was happy with news. At least, those who were actually present for the announcement. 2 hours later, Naruto laughed, listening to Choji and Shikamaru's stories from their youth. All 3 boys had been at the bottom of their class at the academy and were now making jokes about their behavior and how fun it was to annoy their teacher, Iruka-sensei. Their mission had gone well and now they were going to get something to eat. They were at Ichiraku's, waiting for their ramen when a blonde girl with a long ponytail approached them. Hey, have you guys heard the news? She asked them. The ramen was set in front of them and Naruto and Choji immediately started eating. Shikamaru sighed and asked, what news? The girl, Ino Yamanaka, was shocked. You haven't heard about the wedding? Shikamaru looked confused. What's so important about a wedding? Ino was excited and exclaimed, Sasuke Uchiha is getting married. That's why it's so important. Naruto, who was eating, nearly choked on his noodles. He turned his attention to Ino and said, you must be joking. No, Naruto, I'm not. His wedding was announced today. She still sounded excited. Much to Ino's displeasure, Naruto laughed. He still did not believe her. Shikamaru noticed Naruto's laugh sounded off, like he really didn't think this whole situation was that funny. Once Naruto had quieted down, Choji asked, hey Ino, who is Sasuke supposed to marry? Disappointment and a tinge of jealousy were both evident in her reply. He'll be marrying Hinata Hyuga at a ceremony in less than 6 weeks from now. Apparently, he asked her and she said yes. Naruto froze. Suddenly, he felt sick. He stared into his bowl of ramen as the news sunk into his brain. His heart felt strange, as though it were much heavier than it should be and beat painfully in his chest. His silence worried his friends. Naruto, are you okay? Ino asked, sounding concerned. He shook his head and tried to put a smile on his face. Yeah, but I think I ate too much. I'm going home. I'll see you later. Naruto left quickly. I hope you feel better. Choji called after him. Shikamaru was quiet while Choji and Ino were talking. He looked at the abandoned bowl of ramen on the counter. It was only halfway finished. There was no other empty bowls nearby. Obviously, eating had nothing to do with Naruto's sudden departure. Shikamaru could remember many times when Naruto had eaten at least 4 bowls of ramen and still wanted more. The mission had gone well and the only other significant thing that happened was the news about Sasuke's wedding. Shikamaru didn't understand what was wrong. Sighing, he went to eat his ramen. The only thing I know for sure is that this situation is going to be troublesome. Naruto still felt bad. The worst part was he didn't understand why. It's not like Sasuke was going anywhere or leaving again. But that's what it was beginning to feel like to Naruto. He continued his walk to the Hokage monument, trying to understand what he was feeling. Once he arrived, he sat down and looked at the village. The sun was beginning to set and it dyed the sky orange. Normally, he would have found the sight relaxing, but not today. Ino's words replayed in his head, especially that last part. Apparently, he asked her and she said yes. But why? Why had Sasuke asked Hinata of all people? Why was Sasuke getting married at all? Did he need to? Most importantly, why was it bothering Naruto so much? No, he realized, it's not bothering me. Instead, it hurts. What are you doing here? A voice startled him out of his depressing thoughts. Naruto looked at the speaker. It was Sasuke. Forcing a smile, he replied, I could ask the same thing of you. Sasuke knew immediately that the smile was a fake, but he didn't mention it. Instead, he answered Naruto. I was waiting for you to get back. I didn't feel like spending time with anyone, so I came to wait up here, where nobody would bother me. What about you? Naruto spoke softly as he responded truthfully, I just needed to clear my head and think about some things. Sasuke looked surprised. Really? I thought your head was always empty. You know, if you think too much, you might hurt yourself. Hearing that, Naruto laughed a little. A small smile returned to his face. Congratulations, Sasuke, he said, after a moment. Sasuke froze. What? Naruto tried to sound happy when he replied, you're getting married to Hinata in a month and a half, right? You made a good choice. She's a nice person. Sasuke said nothing as he listened to Naruto's words. Naruto, you've got it all wrong, he tried to say, but trailed off. He was about to say, I didn't choose to get married, but he remembered his earlier talk with Tsunade, so he stopped, mid-sentence. What have I gotten wrong? Naruto asked, hoping that Ino had been wrong about this whole marriage thing. The wedding isn't in a month and a half. It's in less than 6 weeks. Oh. Naruto could feel his hopes getting dashed, while Sasuke felt guilty but wasn't sure why. There was an uncomfortable silence between them. This persisted until Sasuke said he was getting tired and wanted to go back to the apartment. Naruto agreed. Together, they left. Most of the walk was carried out in silence. Once they caught sight of Naruto's apartment building, Sasuke challenged Naruto to a race, hoping that would make Naruto feel better. As expected, the blonde looked determined and said, there's no way I'm going to lose to you, Sasuke. The raven-haired boy smirked and said, we'll see about that, Uzuratonkachi. They sprinted to the building, skillfully evading people and objects in their path. Naruto arrived at the finish line first. See, I told you I'd win. Naruto exclaimed while he waited for Sasuke to catch up. It didn't take long, only about 8 seconds. The raven-haired boy panted and said, don't think you can win all the time, Dobi. You just got lucky, that's all. Sounds like you're just jealous because I'm better than you. Needless to say, this banter between the two continued, even after they got inside the apartment. For both of them, it felt as if nothing had changed, as though there was no impending marriage or anything like that. Things felt normal, and it was nice. Hinata stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. She was feeling nervous. It had been 3 days since the engagement had been announced, and she had been trying to avoid everyone for as long as she possibly could. Since she was a shinobi, she still needed to go on missions. That was the only reason why she was leaving her home. She was worried about how the village would react to her now that everyone knew she was supposed to marry Sasuke. It was likely that everyone would just wish her well or congratulate her. However, she wondered if her friends would treat her differently. One person in particular mattered to her, and she needed to talk to him, to see if they could at least remain friends. This last thought made her sad, and she put the brush down, remembering how he would compliment her, saying how beautiful her hair was. I should have told him. Hinata whispered quietly, wiping away a stray tear. She looked at the mirror, and saw her own sad face looking back. Taking a deep breath, she tried to calm down. She needed to be strong. Hinata turned towards the door, not looking at the mirror. I can do this, she thought as she left her house. I hope. Hi, Sasuke-kun. A cheery voice greeted the Uchiha as he continued his community service. He looked down from where he was perched on the roof, and saw a pink-haired girl smiling at him. What do you want, Sakura? He asked, resuming his task of cleaning out the rain gutters on the roofs of the houses in the village. He needed to clean each one, and he didn't have time to waste on idle chit-chat. Sakura quickly climbed to where he was and said, I just want to see how you're doing. Sasuke rolled his eyes and retorted, how I'm doing what? He had hoped that would discourage her, but instead he heard a peal of laughter. You're so funny, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke thought about that. Funny. Well, that was something you didn't hear every day. After Sakura was finished laughing, her smile began to shrink. Sasuke-kun, I want to speak to you. She sat down on the roof near him. Make it quick. He removed a chunk of rotted leaves out of the gutter and tossed it into a trash bag. The girl fidgeted while she spoke. I want to congratulate you on your engagement. Was his response. Sakura continued, what I mean is, she paused, playing with her hair nervously. Finally, she gathered her courage and said what she really felt. I don't think you should marry someone who doesn't love you. Sasuke, who had been diligently working, stopped. Dark eyes narrowed slightly. All right, then. Who do you think I should marry? A blush formed on the girl's cheeks and she didn't make eye contact with him. Well, someone who understands you and loves you. She stopped for a moment, wondering if she should continue. He said nothing. From his silence, she reasoned he wanted to hear the rest of her explanation. You may not love this person now, but I'm sure if you gave me, this person, a chance, I'm sure you would be very happy. Sakura, he said softly. Green eyes widened and her tone became hopeful. Why yes, Sasuke-kun. You're being really annoying. What? Sakura asked, dumbstruck. Sasuke sighed and resumed digging out the rotted vegetation clogging the gutter. Sakura, I don't feel that way about you. Don't ask me why. I just don't. I see you as a comrade. A friend, even. Not a girlfriend or anything remotely close to that. You need to find someone who has a romantic interest in you. Do you understand? Sakura was close to tears when she answered him, okay, but why do you want to marry Hinata? When Sasuke replied, his voice was cold, I don't want to marry her. I'm only doing it because I was asked to. No, not asked, forced to. Quote. But why, Sasuke-kun? Her eyes were filled with worry. Sasuke was fully aware he was giving away too much information, so he needed to think of something, and quickly. He decided on half of the truth. The village elders asked me how I could prove I would be loyal to Konoha. I suggested an arranged marriage. They approved, and suggested Hinata. I agreed. That's all there is to it. Although it was true that an arranged marriage would tie Sasuke to Konoha, it sure wasn't his idea, nor did he select whom he was supposed to marry. Half of the truth. Oh, I guess I understand now. Sakura still sounded sad, but she tried to smile anyway. She decided to change topics. So, what's it like living with Naruto? I bet his apartment is a mess. Sasuke smirked, remembering the mess when he originally arrived. Yes, it was at first. But not anymore. Sakura smiled a little more. Okay. I think I'll let you finish up now. If I keep hanging around like this, I'll be late for my shift at the hospital. Bye, Sasuke-kun. As Sakura left, Sasuke realized how easy it had been to tell her about the marriage. He hadn't even cared that she had once claimed to love him. He didn't feel bad at all telling her he wasn't interested in her. There was one thing he didn't understand though. Why wasn't he able to tell Naruto that easily when he first found out while he was still locked up? In fact, that's something he and Naruto wouldn't discuss. The wedding. There seemed to be an unspoken agreement between the two, don't talk about the wedding. Even when Sasuke would accompany Naruto on a mission and a stranger would try to approach Sasuke to congratulate him, the raven-haired boy would glare at the person, warning them. The stranger would then slink away, scared of provoking the Uchiha's wrath. These thoughts were slowly but surely giving Sasuke a migraine. Damn Sakura. Why did she need to come by and bother him? It was bad enough that two Anbu had been watching him while he worked, which was annoying. Pair that with Sakura's comments and these thoughts, and that was a recipe for a brain hemorrhage. Despite this, Sasuke found one bright spot in this situation. At least I don't need to marry Sakura. Kakashi Hatake was amused. The silver-haired Junin had been assigned to keep an eye on Sasuke while he performed various tasks around the village. Kakashi didn't know Sasuke had so much work ethic. The Uchiha had cleaned all the rain gutters, washed the windows on the Hokage's mansion, pulled the weeds out of the gardens in the park, cut the grass in the park, and he was even assigned to play with some small children. That last assignment had been particularly fun to watch. Sasuke had his back turned and he was going to leave the park, when a group of about 6 children approached him. They looked to be about 7 years old. They wanted to play catch, they had told him. He had originally declined, citing he didn't feel like it. One child had darted awa, and returned with an old woman. Sasuke had glared when he saw her. It was none other than Koharu Udatane. She then ordered him to play with the kids. Sasuke, being bound by that damn contract, agreed reluctantly. Before he knew it, Sasuke was getting pelted with all sorts of objects. Baseballs, stuffed animals, sticks, rocks, and even a few mud balls. He had wanted to retaliate by hurling a few shuriken in those brats' direction, but with his perfect aim, he probably would have gotten in more trouble than what he was currently in. He had two options: take this abuse from these snot-nosed punks or fight back. Fighting back was the only reasonable option. However, he couldn't do it using his usual method. No, what he needed was non-lethal force. Taking shelter from the various projectiles being thrown at him, he devised a plan. There is an old saying that goes, "You need to fight fire with fire." In his experience, he found that to be true. But that saying did not apply to this situation. Instead, he needed to fight mud with mud. Activating his Sharingan, he emerged from the bush where he had concealed himself. In all honesty, he did not need his Sharingan, but he wanted to instill a healthy bit of fear in those kids. What better way than with blood-red eyes? Meanwhile, the children had been looking for him. When one spotted him, he alerted his fellow conspirators with a shout of, "There he is! Get him!" The children rushed Sasuke, but he was ready for them. Sasuke, who was holding something behind him, addressed the kids, "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Yeah," came the reply, sounding almost like a battle cry. "All right, but look what I have." The raven-haired boy showed them a pail. It was medium-sized, light green with small pink flowers etched on its surface. The kids laughed and one boy commented sarcastically, "Ooh, a bucket. I'm so scared." This elicited more laughs from the others. Sasuke smirked. "Fine, laugh it up." He reached into the pail. Suddenly, there was a blur as something flew through the air, then a noise. Splat. The children stopped. One little boy hit the ground. Then again, splat, splat. 2 more children fell. Splat, splat. All of the children were stunned, lying in the grass, except one. The little boy who had made that bucket comment. "No, mister, I didn't mean to." Sasuke didn't let the boy continue. Splat. All was quiet, until Koharu come rushing over. She had been watching the whole scene and she looked angry. "Uchiha, what have you done?" she demanded to know. Sasuke continued to smirk, then pointed to the children. They were now laughing hysterically. "Mister, that was great. You're awesome," praised the children, getting up and walking over to him. Their faces were coated with mud. Sasuke blinked, and his eyes returned to their normal onyx shade. "Nothing. I was just playing with the kids, as you requested," he replied, holding up the pail. "Yeah, and it was great, Koharu-sama," a little girl said, a big smile on her muddy face. Koharu looked shocked. "You actually had fun with Sasuke?" Sasuke didn't like her tone when she spoke. It wouldn't surprise him to know if she had set up this little play date with these twerps intentionally, just to see if he could do it successfully. If he couldn't, she would then say he wasn't following the contract. That contract is the bane of my existence, Sasuke thought, frowning slightly. The children crowded around the old woman, still happy. Sasuke-sama is so cool. Did you see what he did? He got us good, they said, excited. Koharu-sama, why aren't you as cool as Sasuke-sama? One asked. Koharu looked angry again. All right, children, that's enough. Your parents are probably going to worry about you. Now, let's go. Koharu turned away from Sasuke, trying to make the kids follow her. She herded them around her and moved in the direction of the park's exit. A little girl darted away, toward Sasuke. She smiled shyly as she approached him, and asked, Sasuke-sama, can I have my pail back? He nodded and said, I found it under a bush. You should take better care of your stuff. He passed her the pail. She smiled and turned around to leave. Hey. The girl paused, hearing his voice. You should be proud. That pail has served me well, he said, walking away. The girl giggled with joy, then skipped back to Koharu and the other kids. Naruto looked around, frowning. It was who he wasn't seeing that made him frown. He was supposed to meet Shino, Hinata, and Kiba for a mission, but only Hinata and Shino were present. What happened to Kiba? Naruto asked Shino. Shino shrugged. No idea. Maybe he's sick or something. Hinata began to fidget, which Naruto noticed. Hinata, do you know where Kiba is? When she replied, she didn't look directly at the blonde. Why yeah, Naruto-kun. He isn't feeling well. Shino looked at Hinata carefully, a quizzical look in his eyes. How did she know that? Shino spoke. Tsunade-sama said this mission needed to be accomplished by a 4-man squad. I'll go tell her he's not here. This mission isn't overly important. Maybe we can reschedule it for later, when Kiba's here. You two wait here. I'll be right back. Before the others could reply, Shino left in the direction of the Hokage's office. I hope he hurries up. I want to see what Sasuke's doing, Naruto said, watching Shino start running. Naruto turned back and looked at Hinata. She smiled at him and asked, Are you happy that Sasuke-san is back in the village? The blonde boy grinned broadly. I spent so many years training just so I could get strong enough to bring him back. Happy? You bet I am. Before she could respond, he continued, blue eyes shining with happiness. Now, I get to see him every day, so why wouldn't I be happy? Suddenly, Naruto looked at Hinata and remembered that she was engaged to Sasuke. Naruto's smile faltered, and a flash of sadness was now visible in his once happy eyes. Congratulations, Hinata. Sasuke will be a good husband. Even though he sometimes acts like a bastard, he really isn't. He's just complicated, I guess. So, make him happy, okay. Hinata was stunned. Naruto's eyes had clearly shown how he felt about Sasuke. That look in his eyes when he told her to make Sasuke happy, that was heartbreak. Was Naruto heartbroken over the marriage? Did he love Sasuke? Naruto, realizing his tone had changed, smiled again, successfully erasing any sadness from his features. He laughed nervously and said, So, how have you been lately, Hinata? I haven't seen you in a few days. I was fine, just busy training with my father and sister. Hinata said, amazed with Naruto and his ability to conceal his sorrow so quickly. Before he could reply, Shino returned. Tsunade-sama said we could go on the mission next week. I ran into Kiba's mother on the way back and told her about the mission. She told me that she will ensure Kiba will be there. Okay, I'll see you guys later, then, Naruto said, leaving. Shino nodded and left. Bye, Naruto-kun, called Hinata. Naruto smiled and waved at her. Instead of going home, Hinata sat down on a nearby bench, reflecting on the day's events, especially her important conversation with her own love. Flashback. Earlier that day, Hinata had found him at the training field. He had smiled brightly, seeing her. Hinata didn't smile and he asked what was wrong. She kissed him briefly. Kiba-kun, we need to talk. Kiba's grin disappeared. He had been dreading this talk. It was inevitable, he knew, but still didn't want it to occur. I know. It's about your marriage, right? Hinata nodded, tears shining in her eyes as she looked at him. Yes. You know that means we can't be together anymore. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? She asked, tears falling down her cheeks. Kiba said nothing, and held her in his arms. He kissed the top of her head. It's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. It was Hiyashi's decision, wasn't it? She nodded. Kiba scowled. Ever since Hiyashi Hyuga had found about Kiba and Hinata's relationship, he demanded an end to it. He had said that he didn't want his daughter to be with a mud handler, referring to the Inuzuka clan and their fondness for ninkin, or ninja dogs, as their fighting companions. Hiyashi had probably jumped at the opportunity for Hinata to marry Sasuke, the last of the noble Uchiha clan. Kiba looked at Hinata and began to gently wipe away her tears. He tried to smile as he spoke. Come on, Hinata. Smile. You look so beautiful when you smile. Hinata laughed a little, although her tears still fell. She sniffled and said, what do we do now? I don't know. I guess we can be friends, Kiba suggested. He didn't want to be just friend with her, but it felt like he had no other choice. No, Kiba-kun. I don't want to be just friends with you. Hinata said quietly, a blush coloring her cheeks. What are you saying, Hinata? Kiba asked, heart racing as he awaited her answer. I'm saying, why can't we be together for a while longer? Until I actually marry Sasuke. Then it will be over permanently. Kiba's eyes widened. You'll be cheating on Sasuke. If he finds out, won't he be pissed off? Her blush deepened, her cheeks nearly glowing pink. He doesn't need to know about it. When she spoke, her nervousness was evident. She was terribly worried that Kiba would think less of her, and silently chastised herself for such an absurd suggestion. The Inuzuka said nothing. He didn't know how he was supposed to feel. Half of him was thrilled he would get to remain Hinata's boyfriend, while the other half didn't want to deal with the negative repercussions of such actions. Hinata, I don't know. I need to think about it. You should too. Let's go, Akamaru. Kiba turned away from Hinata, Akamaru following him as he left the training field. The dark-haired girl stood there alone, unsure of what she would decide. Her decision was also frightening, especially if she decided to continue seeing Kiba. What kind of person would that make me if I stay with Kiba-kun? She whispered, worried. End of flashback. // Homura, we have a problem. Koharu said quietly to the elderly man. Homura looked annoyed. Yes, we do. That Uchiha punk is more committed than I thought. At this rate, he'll end up being well liked in the village and will have completed all his community service. Then, he would end up evading his true punishment. Both village elders were quiet as they each thought of an impossible task for Sasuke. They had thought he would have failed playing with the kids earlier. All of Sasuke's records had reported the same thing, antisocial tendencies. Yet, there he was, making a group of children laugh and praise how cool he was. It was infuriating. The only way to put an end to this is to give him so much work, he'll be too exhausted to finish. Homura said. The man got up from his chair and walked to a nearby cabinet. After he removed a key from his pocket, he unlocked a drawer and opened it. He removed a pair of black metal rings that were the same size as handcuffs. Unlike handcuffs, the rings weren't bound together. There were strange etchings on the rings that seemed to be evil in origin, as though they were specifically made for a diabolical purpose. Koharu's eyes glinted coldly as he eyed them. Oh, I see. That will definitely wear him out. Homura looked pleased and said, indeed. These bands will sap his chakra and energy. He won't be able to resist fatigue. Nobody can function normally while wearing these. On his next assignment, he will be forced to wear them. After that, it's only a matter of time before he either collapses from exhaustion or doesn't complete his work. No matter what, the end result will still remain the same. The woman's voice was filled with malice when she replied. Yes. A dead Uchiha. Neji Hyuga frowned as he read the details of his latest assignment. Today, he would need to supervise Sasuke Uchiha as he performed community service. Neji wasn't too happy with the assignment. He knew that it would be boring, and he wasn't sure how he should react to Sasuke. After all, Sasuke had only returned to the village 2 weeks prior, and he was supposed to marry Hinata in 4 weeks. Neji hadn't even spoken to Sasuke, but he had seen him around the village with Naruto. As usual, Naruto had been in a good mood, being very casual with the Uchiha, as if Sasuke hadn't abandoned the village and been gone for years. Admittedly, Neji was wary of Sasuke. However, he did feel that Naruto was a good judge of character, and if Naruto was comfortable with Sasuke, then perhaps he wasn't so bad. Neji did have faith in Naruto, so he decided he would give Sasuke a chance. Besides, Sasuke would eventually marry Hinata, which would result in him being a part of the family, which meant Neji would have to deal with him on a regular basis. Might as well get used to him now. Neji thought as he walked to where his assignment would be held. Hey, Sasuke, wake up. Sasuke rubbed his eyes, and replied, shut up, Dobi. I'm awake. Naruto snorted. Yeah, right, you're falling asleep at the table. Quote. Sasuke felt like rolling his eyes, but was too tired. Naruto was beginning to worry about his friend. Both boys were sitting at the kitchen table, eating breakfast. Well, at least Naruto was. Sasuke was leaning on the table, falling asleep. Naruto's eyes were drawn to the black metal bands on the other boy's wrists. Sasuke had been wearing them for the past few days. He had explained to the blonde that he was required to wear them, but provided no explanation as to why. Naruto had a feeling that Sasuke himself didn't know the real reason. Naruto glanced at the clock. Sasuke, you need to get going. You'll be late for today's assignment. Sasuke rose slowly from the table and walked to the door. Fine. Let's go. Naruto followed Sasuke, afraid that the raven-haired boy would fall over from exhaustion. Naruto grinned, but was still nervous when he saw Neji's stern expression. The Hyuga nodded in greeting to Naruto, but addressed Sasuke sharply, Uchiha, you're late. HN. Was Sasuke's reply, as he looked around. The trio was currently in front of a small house about a mile away from the village, near the main road leading toward the forest. The house was designed plainly, colored beige with a dark roof. The only decoration was an old wheelbarrow, coated with dirt. Despite the nearby forest, the garden in the yard was dead and overgrown with grass and various weeds. The soil around the plants was dry and cracked. It looked unsuitable for any plant, except maybe a cactus. Neji spoke, you have been assigned to clear out the weeds, and replant new flowers. Really? I never would have guessed, Sasuke remarked dryly. Naruto looked confused. Okay, but where is he supposed to get the flowers from? Quote. Hearing this, Sasuke smiled bitterly. Let me guess. I need to take that wheelbarrow and go to the Yamanaka flower shop, fill it up, come back here and plant the flowers, and repeat as necessary, right? Neji nodded and added, you also need to cart away the weeds. Of course. Sasuke answered. Last time I checked, I was still a shinobi. Why do I keep getting gardening assignments? The raven-haired boy thought, getting very annoyed with this whole community service thing. This is ridiculous. I'm being treated like a common criminal. Oh wait, I am a criminal. Damn. Naruto, you'd better get going. Sasuke said, walking toward the dead garden. Naruto said nothing. He was just watching the other boy carefully. Neji noticed the scrutiny. Is there something wrong, Naruto? No, not really. He replied, then looked at Neji and asked, can you see someone's chakra flow with your Byakugan? A confused look greeted his question. Yes, but why are you asking? Naruto beckoned Neji to follow him. They walked a few feet away, until they were out of Sasuke's range of hearing. Speaking quietly, Naruto made a request, can you check Sasuke's chakra flow? Lately, he's been really tired and I'm beginning to think he's overworking himself. Neji glanced at Sasuke, who was ripping the weeds out of the dry earth and tossing them in a slowly growing pile behind him. He seems fine. Why do you think something is wrong with his chakra? When my chakra is low, I feel tired. Isn't that the same with you? Yes. All right, I'll do it, but after this, you do need to get going. I was given orders not to waste any time and ensure that Sasuke completes all of his assigned tasks. Neji focused his chakra and closed his eyes. Byakugan. He called, opening them, revealing the Kekkei Genkai of the Hyuga clan. He turned his gaze back to the Uchiha, and began to frown. It appears your theory is correct, Naruto. His chakra is very low. Much lower than it should be. If I had to guess, I'd say that something was sapping his chakra, but I cannot discern what it could be. Do you know what it is? No. Naruto lied. Truthfully, he suspected that the sudden fatigue was caused by those metal bands on Sasuke's wrists, but he didn't think telling anybody else would be a good idea. His reason was simple. He might be wrong about the bands. Sure, they did have weird-looking symbols carved on them, but they could just be decorative. He needed to ask someone with extensive knowledge on ninja tools. Thanks for your help, Neji, the blonde said. The Junin nodded, deactivating his Byakugan. You are welcome. Naruto began walking in the direction of the village, but stopped after a few steps. He turned around and asked Neji, do you know where Tenten is? Various ninja tools littered the grass of the training field. They were mostly kunai and shuriken, and their blades gleamed in the sun. A girl with brown hair in twin buns, one on either side of her head, began gathering them together. She paused when she heard footsteps approaching. Taking a few kunai in her left hand, she stood ready to use them if necessary. Hey Tenten, a voice called, sounding cheerful. The girl smiled, and relaxed. She knew that voice. Hi Naruto. It's been a while since I've seen you. Tenten said, watching as a boy with spiky blonde hair entered her line of sight. Naruto returned her smile and said, yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Then he remembered his purpose for the visit. You're a master of ninja tools, right? Tenten laughed. Well, I wouldn't call myself a master, but yeah, I do know a lot about them. Did you want some information on one? An eager nod answered the question. Yeah. Have you ever seen a black wristband made out of metal, with weird things on it? Weird things? She asked, looking a bit puzzled. They look like squiggly lines, and when it's worn, it causes the wearer to get tired really easily. Naruto said, hoping that cleared up some confusion. Tenten was quiet, twirling a kunai with her right hand, thinking about the boy's peculiar description. Finally, realization was visible on her face. You must be talking about a chakra restriction band. Before he could say anything, the girl continued, providing a detailed description. There are 3 types of chakra restriction bands. Level 1 is white, made out of paper. It causes the wearer to become sluggish and slow down. It can be removed by being cut away. Level 2 is silver painted wood. It causes the wearer to lose chakra, even after the most simple of tasks. It needs to be burned off. Level 3 is the most dangerous one. It is black, made out of a metal, typically steel. It causes the wearer to lose both chakra and energy as long as it is worn. If it is worn for several days, the wearer will eventually die. Unfortunately, it cannot be removed. At least, I don't know how it could be removed. Naruto looked shocked. How do they work? Simple. All 3 levels use a seal. The seal is written or etched onto the surface of the band. The strength of the seal depends on what purpose the bands are needed for. The white is the weakest seal and the black contains the strongest seal. White is usually used to calm someone down, or sedate them. Silver is used on prisoners, to keep them from causing trouble. Black is used as a last resort. It is put on only for the intention of killing someone. The black seal acts like a leech, draining the energy of the wearer until they eventually succumb to extreme fatigue, and their body fails. Can the seals be broken? Yes, definitely the silver and white. Tenten paused, thinking about it. Maybe the black. I suspect if you have a source of chakra that is stronger than the seal, it will cause the band to break and the effects will stop. However, I don't think a normal person is capable of producing a chakra that is so strong. Naruto said nothing. The blonde was in a state of disbelief. Someone was trying to actually kill Sasuke. Who was it, and why? He didn't know, but there was one thing he knew, without a doubt. I won't let anybody take him away from me. Naruto thought, resolve evident in his blue eyes. I will break that seal. With a smile on his face, he addressed Tenten. Thank you for the info, Tenten. You're the best. I definitely owe you one. The kunoichi looked surprised and felt more than a little confused. In addition to describing a rather vile item, she had just seen Naruto's facial expression shift from being normal and cheerful, to shocked and a little scared, then disbelief, and finally, a determination that suited the blonde. Sure. Anytime. She hesitated before asking him a question. Naruto, what made you ask me about the bands? Have you encountered one somewhere? Naruto lied. No, I just saw one in an old scroll I was reading. There was no name listed and only a vague description provided, so, I decided I could ask an expert. Tenten's brown eyes narrowed. She didn't really believe Naruto's explanation, but had no real reason not to. Okay, but if you do happen to encounter one of them, can you bring me it, even if it's broken? I'd like to see one up close. Very few have been made, due to their effects. Especially the black one. I've heard they are made only by skilled shinobi who know older, more dangerous sealing techniques. Naruto nodded. Yeah, if I ever find one, you'll be the first person I'll tell. Great. She replied, expertly tossing shuriken at nearby targets. Not surprisingly, all of the projectiles hit their mark. Naruto was impressed, and would have liked to stick around to train with the girl, but he had other matters to attend to. He needed a way to help Sasuke. That was the most important thing. After saying bye, Naruto left the training field, reflecting on all he learned. Sasuke panted. He was beginning to feel lightheaded. He was sitting in the dirt, surrounded by plants. He wasn't sure how long he had been working. He glanced up at the sky, at the sun's position. He guessed it had been at least 4 hours. Sasuke looked around him, at what he accomplished and what still needed to be completed. In front of the house, there was now a more respectable little garden. Gone were the dead plants and weeds that infested the patch of soil. Instead, healthy little plants with multicolored blooms added a pop of color to the plain house. The weeds were piled together, some distance away, still waiting to be disposed of. He was nearly finished. Or so he thought. Sasuke slowly stood up, and staggered over to the house. For some reason, he felt like checking out the backyard. He pushed the wooden gate open, and his eyes widened with disbelief. It was a mess. There was trash everywhere, mixed with plants covered in barbs. Even the leaves of the plants looked sharp. You also need to fix this area too, said a voice behind him. Sasuke didn't turn around to see the look on Neji's face. Even the Hyuga sounded shocked, and there was even a hint of sympathy in his voice. Damn, Sasuke, you really do have your work cut out for you. HN was the only reply the Uchiha could do. He was too tired to say anything else. Sasuke walked forward, and knelt in the plants, leaves sticking to his clothes. He began to doggedly rip at them, cutting the palm of his right hand. He watched as the blood trickled slowly down, until it fell onto the ground beneath him. Dizzy, he sat there a few more moments staring at his bleeding hand. He might have continued to stare, but his vision blurred. He fell forward, and then everything went black. What the hell's going on? Naruto yelled, bursting onto the hospital room. He startled Sakura, who had been sitting by Sasuke's bedside. Naruto, calm down. Everything is going to be fine, I think. He just passed out, but all of his vitals are stable. Why did he pass out? His chakra has been reduced to next to nothing. It was exhaustion, Sakura reported, her green eyes filled with worry as she looked at the unconscious Uchiha. She got up to check the IV connected to Sasuke's wrist, right below the chakra restriction band. Has he been eating properly? Naruto took Sakura's now vacant seat. Of course. He answered, not looking at the girl. His intent gaze was fixed on Sasuke. The other boy's face had scratches. Sakura noticed Naruto's stare and asked, do you know how his face got cut? Naruto explained, Neji told me that Sasuke had been pulling weeds, and then all of a sudden, he paused, and then fell forward into the plants. Most of the plants had thorns and other sharp parts. Sakura nodded, writing that down. That makes sense, the pink-haired girl put down her clipboard. Naruto, how has Sasuke-kun been behaving? Does he ever complain about the amount of community service he gets? No, he doesn't like it, but he never complains. I guess he just wants the village to forgive him. Naruto replied. Needless to say, the boy was still unaware of Sasuke's contractual obligation. Sakura glanced at the round wall clock briefly before she made a request. Naruto, I need you to keep watch over Sasuke-kun and tell me if he wakes up. Do you mind staying by his side? Please do this for me. I need to tend to other patients. Sure. Sakura-chan. I'll stay as long as it takes. He promised, smiling at the girl. Sakura returned his smile. I'm so glad I can always count on you. She replied, walking towards the exit, and leaving the room. After she left, Naruto was silent. He was getting more and more worried about Sasuke, and now there was no doubt that those chakra bands needed to come off. In addition, today had proven that Sasuke was getting too much work. Naruto knew he needed to help Sasuke, but he couldn't be obvious about it. True to his word, Naruto remained at Sasuke's bedside until he woke up the following day. After a quick checkup from Sakura, Sasuke was ready to leave the hospital. Are you sure you're okay, Sasuke-kun? Sakura asked again, wanting to make sure he was fine. For the last time, yes, I'm fine. Sasuke replied, irritated. Naruto frowned at him. Sighing, Sasuke tried to smile a little at Sakura and replied in a kinder voice, yes, Sakura, I'll be fine. Thank you for all your concern. I appreciate it. Sakura smiled brightly, you don't need to thank me. I'm just glad you're doing well. She turned to Naruto. Okay, Naruto, I want you to keep an eye on Sasuke. Make sure he gets plenty of rest today and he shouldn't be getting all worked up, so don't pick fights with him. Sure, whatever you say, Sakura-chan. Then he leaned toward her and whispered, but just so you know, Sasuke is the one that starts all the fights. The girl laughed. I heard that, Dobi. Sasuke said, glaring at the other boy. Naruto was unfazed, and his grin was intact. Come on, Sasuke. Don't be such a bastard. You just woke up. I know, but I still need to finish yesterday's assignment. So, if you'll excuse me, I need to get going. Sasuke replied, getting up and walking past Naruto and Sakura, and leaving the hospital. He seems back to normal. Sakura observed, sounding pleased. Sure does. Naruto agreed. Then he added, don't worry about him, Sakura-chan. I'll help Sasuke as much as I possibly can. Believe it. I know, Naruto, and I do believe it. 15 minutes later, Sasuke was sitting on the couch in Naruto's apartment, confused. He had went back to the house near the forest, and to his surprise, the yard looked great. He even checked the backyard, where he had fainted. It was immaculate. All the odd plants were replaced with healthy flowers. All the trash was gone. There wasn't a trace of the mess that existed 24 hours ago. Sasuke didn't know who could have done this, but he definitely wasn't complaining. With nothing else to do, Sasuke had returned to the apartment. Sasuke listened as Naruto opened the front door. I'm home, Naruto called loudly, closing the front door behind him. I can see that. The Uchiha replied with a yawn. Are you getting tired, Sasuke? No. Naruto folded his arms and fixed the other boy with a knowing look. That's a bunch of crap and you know it. If you're tired, you should rest. You heard what Sakura-chan said. I did hear her, but I don't feel like going to sleep, said Sasuke. Naruto took a moment to think before replying, all right, then. How does this sound to you? We'll trade places. I'll let you sleep in my bed, and I'll sleep on the couch, like you normally would. That way, you can sleep better and maybe you won't be so tired and cranky. Sasuke was losing his patience. Cranky. I am not cranky. I'm just sick of dealing with an idiot like you all day. Right. Anyway, I still think you should. Sasuke interrupted him. If you tell me to go to sleep one more time, I swear I'll kick your ass. Defiance gleamed in Naruto's blue eyes. I'd like to see you try. Once I knock you out, I'll just put you in bed anyway, so it's not like it really matters. You talk tough, but can you actually back it up? The raven-haired boy asked, getting off the couch and advancing toward Naruto, Sharingan activated. Bring it on, Naruto challenged, getting into his fighting stance. Sasuke did the same, ready for battle. They stared at each other, wondering who would make the first move. Naruto rushed forward, trying to punch his roommate. Sasuke countered the punch. He grabbed Naruto's arm and threw him against the floor. The blonde gasped, as the air was knocked out of his lungs upon impact. He lay there for a moment, then sat up and was face to face with Sasuke. The Uchiha was sitting on him, holding a kunai to his throat. Really, Naruto, is that the best you can do? He taunted, crimson eyes looking amused. No. There was a poof, as the shadow clone disappeared. What the? Sasuke didn't have time to react. The real Naruto hit him on the back of the neck, knocking Sasuke out. The raven-haired boy slumped forward on the floor. Naruto picked him up and carried him to his bedroom. He placed the now sleeping boy in the bed, and put a blanket over him. Naruto pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Tentatively, he placed his hand over one of Sasuke's and spoke softly, you know, it feels like nothing ever changes with us. We call each other names and fight. We even work together and help each other too. Naruto bit his lip, wondering if he should continue. He decided to. No matter what happens, I will always be your friend, and I will help you, even if you think you don't need me. Because, the truth is, I think I need you. So, that means I'll be looking out for you, even if you don't know it. Naruto tightened his grip on Sasuke's hand, and leaned back in his chair. He didn't mind sleeping here, in this chair. As long as he was near Sasuke, it didn't matter. When Sasuke woke the following morning, he felt good. He was warm and cozy. For some unknown reason, he felt reassured. Maybe it was because the bed was so comfortable, or maybe it was because Naruto was near him, fingers intertwined with his own. That last realization brought him back to reality. Naruto was doing what to him? Wait, that didn't sound right. He meant Naruto was asleep near him, holding his hand. Yeah, that was better, he guessed. Sasuke wasn't sure how he should feel. Part of him felt like pushing the blonde away and demanding an explanation, while another part didn't mind the contact, which was surprising, considering he didn't like unnecessary contact. Sasuke shook Naruto gently. The blonde stirred, and looked at Sasuke, eyes bleary from sleep. Fighting a blush, the Uchiha made a suggestion. Naruto, since this is your bed, it isn't fair that I just use it. Do you want to share it? There should be enough space for us both. That sounds good, Naruto answered, half asleep. Sasuke moved over, and the blonde crawled into bed next to him. Sasuke noticed Naruto still held on to his hand, but oddly enough, he didn't care. Instead he glanced at the bedside clock. It was only 6 a.m. Sasuke decided he would question Naruto later. Right now, it was too early. 1 week later, Sasuke didn't understand what was going on. Everything was getting very strange. For starters, he had slept in the same bed as Naruto for the past week. Every time he woke up, he felt good. Secondly, Those stupid bands he was forced to wear weren't bothering him at all. When he looked carefully at them, the markings had been changed. Before, they resembled a seal. Now they were cracked. Even the metal was showing signs of being weakened. This development was closely linked to the third strange thing. He wasn't feeling tired anymore. Sasuke had suspected the bands had something to do with his unexplained fatigue, and now, he was convinced of it. It made sense, now that he thought about. Why else would he suddenly be required to wear them? It didn't matter anymore, though. The bands and their awful effects were just about over. He just wanted to know how it happened. The last, and definitely strangest thing was the amount of work he was assigned. It was significantly less. Every time he showed up for whatever job he was assigned for, it was either halfway done, or finished entirely. That cut his workload dramatically, and he had more free time. He was going to use today's free time to figure out what was going on. After a walk around Konoha, Sasuke found Kakashi at the memorial stone. He had been specifically looking for his former sensei, and knew where to go to find him. Kakashi, what's going on? Kakashi shifted his gaze from the stone to Sasuke. Not even a hello for your former team leader. He asked the boy. Don't play dumb, Kakashi. Why have you been doing my assignments for me? Kakashi looked confused. I'm not playing around, Sasuke. I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. How else would anybody else know what I needed to do, except a Junin? All of my supervisors have been Junin, or the occasional Anbu. Sorry, but I haven't interfered. You know, I've heard that there were some papers moved around in the Hokage's office. Maybe that was done by your mystery helper. Kakashi replied calmly, walking away. The man stopped after a few steps. Think about it. Who else do you know who would be reckless enough to help you, even if that means getting in trouble too? With that last question, Kakashi disappeared. Sasuke thought about Kakashi's question. Only one person came to mind. Later that night, Naruto was fast asleep when Sasuke entered his room. The blonde had gone to sleep an hour earlier, complaining about a mission he accomplished during the day and how tiring it had been. Sasuke couldn't help but wonder if Naruto had been secretly doing his community service during that time. He walked quietly towards the bed and looked at Naruto's sleeping face. All day, he had felt like asking for the truth, but in the end, he didn't. Truthfully, Sasuke was just grateful for Naruto, whether or not he was helping him with the assignments. However, it did feel that Naruto was always trying to help him, no matter what. The Uchiha leaned over the blonde's face, and brushed Naruto's hair out of his eyes. Then, without thinking about it, he leaned in closer. He touched the whisker marks on the other boy's face and said, Naruto. Thank you. Sasuke closed the gap between them and kissed Naruto. It was a chaste kiss on the lips that lasted 3 seconds, but caused Sasuke's heart to race, and he felt his face get warm. If he would have had a mirror, he would have seen the rare blush that colored his normally pale skin. Sasuke pulled away from Naruto, and walked back to living room. He felt like sleeping on the couch tonight. He wasn't entirely sure why he had just done what he did. He had acted on an impulse. An impulse to kiss his best friend. I kissed him. I can't believe it, Sasuke thought before he fell asleep. Now what?